This is the Business Briefing. I'm Susanna Streeter. Choked, the US brings in a ban on flavoured e-cigarettes as the vaping industry faces a growing health backlash. Plus, cleaning house, Airbnb tidies up its image ahead of a $30 billion stock market listing this year. We hear from one of the founders. And on the financial markets, Asian stocks edge high after record closes on Wall Street, with China announcing a cut in tariffs on some US goods, also boosting sentiment. Now we start with vaping. It breathed new life into the tobacco industry, but it's now being choked by a global backlash. From today, fruit and dessert flavoured pods for e-cigarettes will be banned in the United States. Now they've been blamed for a surge in use by teenagers as concerns grow about the health effects. According to US health officials at the Centers for Disease Control, 60 people have died and more than 2,700 have been hospitalised from respiratory illness linked to vaping. The industry has seen a fortune go up in smoke, or rather be vaporised. E-cigarette maker Juul was one of the most valuable startups in the US, valued at $38 billion in 2018. That's now been slashed by 2/3 to $12 billion. US tobacco giant Altria invested heavily in Juul and is out to write billions off. You can see just how that's hit the share price. Now, it's not just the US where the vaping industry is under pressure. Argentina, India and Brazil are among the countries to announce bans. But the US move is far less stringent than originally planned, as Zoe Thomas reports from San Francisco.
This is a scaled-down version of the all-out ban President Trump called for last year. The ban covers plenty of kid-friendly flavors like mango, candy floss, and creme brulee, but it doesn't cover all types of e-cigarettes and vaporizers. Vaporizers with pre-filled pods, like the ones used in the popular brand Juul, they are on the list. But Juul already dropped most of its flavors in November of last year. And health officials are saying the ban is too little, too late for young people who've become addicted to nicotine because of vaping. A study by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found more than 1 in 4 teenagers had used an e-cigarette within 30 days of the survey. But even this pared-down version, it isn't good news for the makers of e-cigarettes. Restrictions will make it harder to develop new products. And as of May, manufacturers will need permission from regulators if they want to sell in the US. That means the days of unregulated growth in the sector, they seem to have gone poof. Zoe Thomas, BBC News, San Francisco.
Well, let's go to Australia now, where British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has been holding talks with Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne. He'll then be off to Japan, Singapore and Malaysia, all part of the UK's effort to strike new trade deals now that it's left the European Union. Here's some of what he had to say.
I think it's also vital as we think about broadening our horizons as the United Kingdom to embrace the huge opportunities in the rising economies of the future. And many of those are found in the Indo-Pacific region, which is why this region is so central to our ambitions as a country as we leave the EU. We're seeing that here in Australia. We've got a trade relationship already worth £17 billion, but we've got a potential to do so much more. That's why we've recommitted today to launching negotiations on an ambitious free trade agreement between our countries as soon as possible. Australia, we hope, will be part of that first wave of high priority deals that we're pursuing.
Dominic Raab there, well, the BBC's Shaima Khalil is in Canberra covering the visit. She said there is a lot of excitement in Australia about a possible boost to trade with the UK.
It is a very exciting day for the Australians, Susanna. The fact that Dominic Raab is here is significant enough because this is the first major ministerial visit after Brexit, but the fact that Canberra is his first stop sends a very strong message to the Australians. That's after Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, already said that striking a deal with Australia is on his top 4 priorities. This is a very big chance for businesses here to get back into the UK market, of which they lost a big chunk when the UK joined the EU. You can bet that agriculture is going to be big on the agenda in any agreement between Australia and the United Kingdom. Meat, beef exporters, dairy exporters are looking at this very closely. They've been quite restricted in the amounts that they can export to the UK because of EU constraints. Now that this is no longer an issue, they can get back into that market and, crucially for them at this time, diversify from Asian markets with the economic impact of the coronavirus. So really an exciting time for Australian businesses here, that potential of an opening in the UK.
The BBC's Sharma Khalil in Canberra. Now it's the most highly anticipated share sale of 2020. Home rental app Airbnb could be valued at more than $30 billion when it lists on the stock exchange. Airbnb has had its share of negative publicity, accused of forcing up housing costs for locals and failing to stop disturbance to neighbours. So it's trying to improve that image, promising to run its businesses not just for investors, but for all stakeholders, as the firm's co-founder explained to Michelle Fleury.
At Airbnb, we've committed to serving all our stakeholders. We've specifically enumerated 5 of them, which are our guests, our hosts, employees, shareholders, and the communities in which we operate. And to further formalize that, we've actually defined specific principles and metrics by which we are going to serve our stakeholders so we can hold ourselves accountable over time.
I mean, someone listening right now, forgive them for a degree of skepticism. I mean, they're just going to say, okay, this is a lot of nice words, it's a lot of lofty goals. But I mean, how do they measure that?
This is where I think it's really important to be explicit, to enumerate exactly what it is, what are the impacts that we care about, and how are we actually going to measure them. One example, with our host community, our hosts are making significant income on the platform, and we want to make sure that they're succeeding ever more each year. And so one of the metrics is, what percentage of our hosts are earning more on the Airbnb platform each year than the year before.
But I mean, probably the most problematic area, just looking through your stakeholders, is when it comes to community. That's sort of an area, reading through your manifesto so far, you talk about community and sustainability. But there's this real issue when people look at Airbnb's business model, they say it's causing real problems with housing affordability, and that doesn't seem to be addressed so far.
Well, I think our commitment is to make sure that Airbnb does have a positive impact on communities. And there's many ways in which we can do that. What we've accomplished already is that in more than 500 different municipalities, we've reached agreements on home sharing specific laws. And that includes tax collection, whereby today we've collected over $2 billion in tax tied to short-term rentals, as well as around enforcement activities.
You're planning to go public, or you're hoping to go public this year. Are you not worried that some investors are going to look at this and say, hang on a second, I don't want to share the top tables. As the capital providers, I don't want to have to share equal billing with the other stakeholders?
Well, to be clear, I don't think it's actually zero sum between the interests of the stakeholders. Certainly there are some trade-offs in the short term, but I actually think in the long term, we'll create the most value by creating a business that aligns everybody's interests.